Hola chicas. I have been meaning to get this video done and uploaded for a few days now. I apologize that I hadn't. My house had been pretty crazy the past few days, and so I figured it would be better to do it in my office when I can do it in a little bit more peace and calm and quiet. So we are ready for the next unit of this class, in which we will be looking at El Salvador and Guatemala. So you have 2 chapters from the textbook to read for this, which were on the syllabus. You have the short story that was on the syllabus, which is Guatemala 1954 Funeral for a Bird, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And then instead of the short story Microbus to San Salvador, I decided to assign, there's a web link for an article about the truth of El Mazote. So, first of all, the meat of this unit. As I had said in the video I posted after the unit on Nicaragua and Honduras, that we are getting into another unit in which we are going to be learning about a lot of violence and human rights atrocities, human rights violations, and some unsavory involvement of the United States government and military in these situations. It's a pretty depressing time period. The 20th century in Central America is pretty depressing in general. It was a time period of civil war or revolutions and unrest and U.S. security fears of communism in the hemisphere. So we tended to have a heavy hand, or our country tended to have a heavy hand in these situations as well. Okay, so the readings, the reason I switched up the readings and assigned the article on the truth of El Mazote. Your textbook, as we've already seen and talked about some, is very much politically and economically focused. It talks about situations of the Civil War and the revolutions, but I feel like it skirts over some things. And for example, it does mention the Truth Commission and the uncovering of El Mazote, but it never really gives a full explanation of what it was and what happened there. And it's extremely important to realize what was going on. El Mazote is an overall example of what was happening in El Salvador with the targeting of civilians and the trying to weed out of guerrillas by wiping out any support bases. It's also a really, I don't want to say fine because that's not a great word to use, it's a very clear, I guess, example of the U.S. involvement in the war there. It's very disturbing, but it's important to understand. So that's why I switched that up. The short story on Guatemala 1954 Funeral for a Bird is, as you've seen in other short stories, it's a bit mystical. It's very symbolic. That's true of much Latin American literature in the 20th century. What I want you to think about with this is, what does this symbolize? Why is the bird so significant? Why are the children so concerned with it? Okay, so you have your 2 chapters in the textbook. You have the short story. You have the El Mazote. You have 1 film in this section. The film is Romero, and it's a feature film that kind of goes over the life of Romero as Archbishop of El Salvador, how he became involved in the plight of the poor, and then what happened with him. Please, 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 in addition to doing these things, make sure you go over the supplemental resources. There's a couple of PowerPoints there. I think I have 3 PowerPoints there, 2 on El Salvador and 1 on Guatemala, and then a timeline of the Guatemalan Civil War. And that timeline is pretty, it's very much an overview, but it has some details about situations that'll better help you understand what was going on in Guatemala. You also have a number of short videos in the module, and we had another film on the syllabus that we were going to do for this time, El Norte, which is about Guatemala. El Norte, though, is very much like an earlier version of Sin Nombre. It's about a Guatemalan brother and sister who are making their way to the United States. And I decided to pull that out because I think I think Sin Nombre is these days more representative of the migrations, of the problems, the issues, the violence, than El Norte. So I put in the short videos in the module instead, the YouTube videos, to have you get a feel for Guatemala, for the situation, the Civil War, and other things. So make sure you watch those. Those are a part of the discussion forum as well. So make sure you do those things, that you take the quiz, and you participate in the discussion for the unit. This unit is due, I want to check the date to be sure, on Wednesday, April 8th. 11:59 p.m. So make sure you get the work done by then. And of course, continue to follow other discussions in the forum and on our Facebook page as we get prepared. We are less than 7 weeks now until we go to Costa Rica. Any questions come up, you know how to find me, multiple places. So let's get going with the unit on El Salvador and Guatemala.